Hello there, my name is ChitChad, and on today's episode, we're entering the third dimension. Thank you so much for stopping by. On today's episode, we are going to be building a 3D animated Mario coin to go along with the Wario and the Waluigi animations that I built on the previous episode. If you want to check those out, feel free to visit the links down in the description below, where you'll also get a bit of a backstory onto what these animations are being used for on my video game channel. For today's episode, like I said, we're building a 3D animation. Now, when it comes to 3D and 3D animations, there are all sorts of products and softwares out there for you to utilize, ranging from the super expensive ones like Maya and 3ds Max to the free ones like Blender. But for this animation, we're going to be building it entirely inside of After Effects, utilizing the Cinema 4D renderer. So with that being said, let's get animating. Alright, so now that we have After Effects loaded, we've got to change this to a Cinema 4D render. Now when you switch renders inside of After Effects, you'll notice that there are some positives and negatives, and not in that one's better or what have you, but that when you select one, it'll be like, alright, here are the new options available, and here are the options that will no longer be available to you. So, especially when it comes to 3D, a lot of the effects will no longer work on the objects. A couple of blending modes, or all of the blending modes, might not be available to you, so you'll have to take that into consideration. And I wouldn't say that objects built inside of After Effects are true 3D objects. It's kind of like that whole 2.5D concept. Not even really that. It's not like I can export this thing out as like an OBJ 3D file or anything like that. It is just contained inside of After Effects. But of course, After Effects can import true 3D models, especially now that it is it's brought Cinema 4D into its workflow process. In fact, you could launch a light version of Cinema 4D right from After Effects, I believe. And I have taken a couple of classes on Cinema 4D. It's still a program that really, for whatever reason, my mind just doesn't quite understand it, and I've tried to. I've actually been taking some online classes for Blender recently, because the Cinema 4D that's attached to, or that you can get with After Effects, is not the full version. It is a Cinema 4D Lite experience. You can still do a lot with it, but it is limited in what you can do. And with Blender, you can basically do anything you want right out the gates, and it is a free program, so it's something that I'm definitely interested in. I just thought it would be really fun seeing as we've done all these animations either inside of Adobe Animate or Adobe After Effects, to just build this entirely inside of Adobe After Effects. And in doing that, really see what can be done in creating these sort of faux 3D objects. And I thought a Mario coin would be a more simplistic object to kind of create for this example. So you'll notice that currently we've got multiple layers going on right now. We've got multiple shape layers, and you'll see that they're white and red. That's just so I can visually see the difference right off the bat. We will eventually convert them over and change them into the classic gold coin that we expect from a Mario coin. That will happen. It's just right now I needed that very distinct visual cue so that I know exactly what I'm looking at, because we're creating multiple objects that are set inside of multiple objects. Now, you'll notice that when I create this shape, I don't have the ability, or it's previous in the video, you'll notice that there's a hole punched out in that shape. Now, a 3D object that's extruded can't do that inside of After Effects, at least not to my knowledge. So what I ended up having to do is pre-comp an object, and essentially pre-comped is like nesting an object inside of another timeline, very similar to what I do in Adobe Animate / Flash when I want to create a more complex animation. But the reason I pre-comped the object was so that I could apply a mask to it, and that mask is then what gives me the hole inside of the coin, which I can then create another object to go inside of it. So essentially we have the outer rim of the coin, we have the coin face. The coin face has a mask that's applied to it that gives us the insetted face, and then the insetted face has another object inside of that, and then we have an extruded object that kind of meets everything in the middle and brings it all together. Now, we're already at the step that I decided to change it over to the gold coin just to see how it would look and make sure that there's no gaps or obvious lines where these objects connect. And the easiest way to see that is to apply a light source. What I'm doing now is applying a null to this coin. Now, a null is essentially an empty object that you can parent other objects to. So in parenting everything to that null, I can then basically just control the null, and that null will move all of the objects for me, which is really nice to have. I use nulls every day at my job and all the time when I'm doing freelancing. Nulls are your best friend. If you have a complicated character or a complicated object, link all of it to a null that makes sense, and then you can control just the null. You can also parent objects to other objects, which I do all the time, but of course, those objects come with something, visually representing them, where a null is basically like an empty folder that you can link everything to. You'll see that I'm going to change transparencies back and forth to make sure that everything is looking good and we don't have any of those gaps in the line work. Now, there is something that's I'm not super happy with, but it just kind of ended up being what it was. You'll see that light right on the rim of the coin as it turns just looks really odd, to me at least. And that was something I attempted to fix by moving the light source around, but for whatever reason, I just couldn't get it to work exactly the way I wanted it to. So what I ended up doing is pre-comping this entire coin down into a brand new comp. And because that pre-comp is not a 3D layer, I can then apply all these effects to. So it's kind of a way to cheat the system. When you switch things into a 3D renderer, like I said, it doesn't allow you to do a lot of blending modes, a lot of different effects. But if you pre-comp that 3D render and then put it, or that 3D object, and then go on the exterior timeline, which I'm doing right now, you can then apply all those effects to it. So I'm adding kind of cartoony highlights and shadows, and really trying to increase the levels so that we get this more stark contrast between the light and the dark values. So it's like a multi-tier process. The more pre-comps, obviously the more complex the animation's getting, because you have timelines inside of timelines, but at the same time you're taking what was a simplistic animation and making it more complex, giving it more life, more energy, more layers essentially. And now I'm applying a toon kind of style render to it so that we can get those really stark contrasts between the shading, because again, I wanted this to look like a Mario coin. And you'll see a lot of the 3D ones, I think in some of the Super Mario Wii U kind of games, they're 3D renders, but they're still got that 2D platforming look to them. So oftentimes they'll apply really stark contrasts of light and dark values, or they'll actually apply some sort of line work around them, giving it kind of that toon shading approach, which a lot of games like Dragon Ball Z is a great example. The newest one has that cell shading look down pat. I love that game. It's so cool looking, and I love toon shading in general. It's something I was very interested in when I was in high school and in college. The first 3D model I actually ever made was Gamma from Sonic Adventure. I guess Sonic Adventure or Sonic Adventure DX, whichever one you've played. But it was kind of a big jump. I'm gonna let my first character be Gamma, and that took me way too long. And then when I actually went to school for 3D and 2D animation, I think the first thing that I modeled there was, the first assignment was a Lego construction, and I think I made a Lego boat or something like that, and it was a lot of fun. 3D animation was something I was really interested in, but I would say 2D animation had my interest a bit more, so I swayed more towards the 2D animation side. But I've always had an interest in 3D, and it's something that I definitely want to grow in and develop my skill set. So this was a fun test just to see how much I could do with the resources that I have, that being After Effects. But I'm hoping that this leads to more 3D projects in the future, because I thought this project turned out pretty cool for, a simple coin animation. And we're actually towards the end of the process for creating this coin, so we are going to jump into a final look at the animation. And that is the final animation for the 3D Mario coin. This was such a blast to make. In fact, all three animations have been really fun, rewarding, and also challenging in their own ways. For this one in particular, it was the first 3D animation we've ever made on this channel. Now, it is rather simplistic because it is a coin, but it was still absolutely fun to make. If you're interested in checking out more art and animation, feel free to check back on this channel. We're going to be doing a lot more art and animation projects in the future. In fact, one of the future videos is going to be a Steamboat Willie styled animation featuring my pet chinchilla Miko. And if you want to see what these Mario animations are being utilized for, feel free to check out my gaming channel. I'll leave a link down in the description below, as well as a link at the end of this video. With all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate it. And as always, I'll chat with you on the next episode.